Tom Anderson, day 62 of 100 Days of Thankfulness. Today is day 2 of pursuing your dream. Today we're talking about the importance of setting your goals, as well as why I'm so thankful for my good friend E Forslund. So I set up the camera today in front of this dark curtain because I want to use this as a planning board for talking about short-term and long-term goals. And we're going to use those to continue what we were talking about yesterday. Yesterday was about the importance of having a dream. Now setting the goals is actually the first step towards actually achieving your dream. So without taking these practical steps towards achieving your dream, it's great having a dream, but if you don't actually take any steps towards achieving the dream, then it's nothing but a pipe dream. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple different strategies. The first one is a short-term strategy, and the second one is a long-term strategy towards achieving your dreams. Now, the short-term strategy is something that I learned when I worked at CWC, and it's this concept of SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, results-focused, and time-bound. And really, when we talk about what that means, specific is it's something that's very clearly defined. Measurable is you need to have some tangible evidence, or it needs to be quantifiable. Achievable means you must possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities to achieve the goal. And results focus means measure the outcomes and not the activities. And time-bound means you need to link your goal to some time frame in order to create a practical sense of urgency. So when we're talking about it being measurable, for example, it's important not to just set a goal that says I want to exercise more. It needs to be more like I'm going to exercise 3 times a week for the next 90 days. Whereas time-bound, an example of that would be when your boss, for example, asks you at work, when will you have that done by? You don't just say, I'll get around to it someday. You actually say, I'll have it done by Friday, or, whatever the day is that you realistically think you can do it. So it's important that when we're setting goals towards achieving our lifelong dreams, that we give it at least the same level of importance that we give our job. Otherwise, once again, it's just a pipe dream. So SMART goals are great, and it worked perfectly at CWC for the annual performance review. But what I had tried to do 16 years ago is I tried to use SMART goals with a group of friends of mine. We got together in 1999 and formed a group called A to G, which stands for Accountable to Goals. And since then, we've been regularly getting together on a monthly basis, talking on the phone, once a week, every other week, just to keep tabs with each other, check on each other's progress, encourage each other for the goals that we're trying to achieve. And what we found through that process is SMART goals works pretty good for the short-term goals, but it doesn't immediately apply towards our long-term dreams. And the reason for that is often your long-term goals are so far out there, they should at least be 5 years or more. If they're not more than 5 years, then you're probably not thinking big enough for your dream. So you might want to go revisit yesterday's topic if you can't come up with a 5-year dream that you want to accomplish. Here's why these don't necessarily work so well for the long term. Starting with specific, having a clear definition of what you want to accomplish, that works great for the next week or the next month. But when you start talking 5 years out there, often we don't even know what we don't know yet. And so spending too much time on clearly defining exactly what it is we want to have, we might find that we're spending more time just trying to define it than we are actually doing it. So you definitely don't want to get in that trap. And we have. The other thing that is a trap with that is because you don't know so much about it and it's this huge goal, you will come to learn more about it, and in part of that learning you'll discover certain obstacles that will get in the way. Now, if you are so rigid about your clear definition and you're not being flexible, you usually can't even find a way around that obstacle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to replace specific for these long-term goals with flexible. And what that means is it doesn't mean, to set the mark really high and then when you encounter an obstacle, then set it a little lower. If anything, it means set it even higher, but redefine it in such a way that you can actually get around the obstacle. A good example of that is when I shared with you about when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Well, obviously my dream now is, in my opinion, it's a lot bigger than that now. But it still has elements of what that original dream was. I still, love scuba diving, snorkeling, sailing, living that adventurous life. That all plays into it. It's just not specifically being a marine biologist. The next one, measurable, having something tangible, having something quantifiable. Again, pretty good for short term, but for the long term, when you're thinking that big, often the best things in life aren't that objective. They're much more subjective. For example, our relationships, which is one of the most important things we can set goals around. It's very difficult to quantify that. So we're going to, for now, just get rid of measurable. Okay, and then the next one, achievable, which is must possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to achieve the goal. So that's all about being realistic, right? Well, when you think about being realistic, think about the Wright brothers, right? If they were to be creating a bunch of SMART goals and their goal was to fly one day, they'd have to take that off the list because that wouldn't be realistic given the technology of the day. So you need to set that goal, if it's a long-term goal, you need to recognize that some of the skills that you will require in order to achieve that, you might not actually have that yet. So you need to give yourself time to grow into that. So again, for now, we're talking long-term towards our dreams, we're going to get rid of achievable. Okay, so the next one, results focus, which is measure outcomes, not activities. What I find for long-term goals, the exact opposite is true. Because what happens is when you encounter these obstacles, and and these obstacles are often something that's completely out of your control, you will find that you set a goal and then you don't get it because of some obstacle, and then you get frustrated, and then you beat yourself up because you didn't do it, and if only I had tried harder. And so many of these things are just going to be out of your control. And when you try to apply that, outcomes focus towards something that's so far out there, it becomes, just kind of this, you enter kind of this crazy state. So it's what I found that is a much more practical step is to do the exact opposite. Don't focus on the outcome, but focus on the action. Focus on how much time are you actually spending? So we're going to replace results focus with action. And what that means is you actually should, like at your job, when you go to work, you are working on a task and your boss says, what did you work on? You can say, well, I spent X amount of hours on this particular activity. That's exactly what we're going to do for our long-term goals. We're going to set goals that say, I want to spend X amount of time per week towards this particular task. And that's it. If you have great results, great. If you run into obstacles, we can be flexible with it. But the main thing is, if you put in the time that you decided that you were going to do that week, celebrate that regardless of the outcome, because the outcome that we're really shooting for here is that you actually put the time towards doing that activity that you said you were going to do. So if you said, I'm going to finish this book by, such and such a time, well, maybe it took a little longer, maybe it took a little less, but change that with, I'm going to read at least an hour a day, and that's my goal. that's a worthwhile goal, if you're, especially if you're trying to be a writer or something like that. So that's what I mean by action. So we have, what do we got? We got flexible, we have action, and then time-bound. Now, time-bound is an interesting one because out of all those original 5 acronyms from S.M.A.R.T, I find time-bound to be exactly perfect for short-term as well as long-term. In fact, what I encourage you to do is try to make your time-bound be short-term in nature. So it is good to have a time set for when you want to accomplish this long-term goal, but it's not a huge deal if you miss it or reach it early. That's not as important as setting incremental time points. So what you want to do is you want to actually say, by the end of the month, I want to have this many hours in on this activity. Or by the end of the year, I want to have this many hours in by this activity. By the end of the week, I want to have this many hours. So that's what I mean by time-bound, where you can basically, I would just leave that one on there exactly as is. So now I'm going to push these up to make room because we're actually going to add a few more letters here for our long-term. Long-term is, has got a lot more requirements than S.M.A.R.T. And I need to have a real cool acronym like S.M.A.R.T, so we're getting there. The last one is, actually it's not the last one, but it might look like it's the last one. It's H, and H is for high-reaching. So you want a high-reaching goal. So what that is exactly what I was talking about yesterday. You don't want to just settle for mediocrity. Shoot for something really high. Even if you don't ever reach it, at least it gives you that direction, which will help you to achieve probably more than what you would have accomplished had you just shot for something that was mediocre. So now we have spelled the word faith. I'm going to keep going, and I'm actually going to add another F, which stands for faith. And that is in all your goals that you're shooting for, every day invite God into it. Bring God into everything that you do, whether it's your goals or anything that you're having trouble with. Make Him a part of it, and He will help direct you in the way that you need to go. I have 2 more letters here. We're going to go with a U, and U stands for unique. You need to make these goals be something that's uniquely you. Don't let someone else set your goals for you. Certainly you can take advice, and sometimes taking advice is a very good thing. Having an accountability group like what I helped form 16 years ago is a very good thing. But don't let someone drive your ship for you. Okay, this is all about you. This is about your goals and your dreams. So make it uniquely you. And then the last one is an L, and it stands for live. And really what that means is don't make your whole life be about just going crazy, pursuing all your goals, pursuing your dreams, without giving yourself a moment, to rest, to live a little bit. Give yourself a break. I'm a big fan of, on a weekly basis, giving yourself one day off just to recharge and, plan out what you're going to do with the next week. So just give yourself that freedom. Make sure you don't become a total workaholic, and you'll get there. Otherwise, if you don't include that L, you're likely to burn out on all this. So that's about it for the goals. Now, I do want to share a bit about my good friend E Forslund. So E Forslund, I mentioned about the A to G group. I actually got to know him really well after high school. Actually, the last day of high school, where everyone was cheering and rushing out the school, I was kind of just lingering on, and I was hanging out at the school, and it was empty, and there was garbage all over the floor because the kids had a big party before they left. And I was just thinking, what happened? All my friends have just left, and what am I going to do now? And I ran into E, and I sort of knew him from classes, but we just got to talking, and I was like, wow, I can't believe it's over already. And that was the start, I'd say, of just an amazing friendship. E has been such a good friend. He's the kind of guy that I can call just on a whim, even in the middle of the night, hey, let's go do this. And, he'd be like, oh, sure, let's go, He has that adventurous spirit that I talked about before. So we have that in common. I remember there was one time where we were, got in the car, and he pulled out a map, of the United States and said, all right, where do you want to go? And, there's a whole story there where we were staring at the map on the side of the road, and a cop pulls up and, held us hostage there for a while, but I don't want to get into all those details. But, that was just the way we were. It's still the way he is. He's gone out to, California with me, and, we picked up a car, and he drove it back, like over 24 hours straight. He drove, all but 2 or 3 hours of it, just continuous. He's just, that crazy of a guy. But E has been, out of any of my friends, he's been the one that has been the biggest on goals. He's been calling me regularly to say, hey, when can we get together and talk about our goals? Or when do you have time to catch up? He's been, I'd say, far better than me about keeping this A to G group going. And so I'm so hugely thankful to him for that, because setting goals is such an important thing. So thanks again to E Forslund.